Hey guys, we are back updating the power rankings for Big Brother 26 towards the end of week 6. And this has been another pretty crazy week, all things considered. A lot of interesting stuff happening. And we still don't know exactly how the week is going to end with who's going home here, which makes it even more exciting. But we'll get to that soon enough. Now, I am recording this on Tuesday, August 27th, and if you're new to the channel, or if you only follow the show through the episodes, I'll be heavily discussing the events of the live feeds and spoiling the video results, so if you don't want to be spoiled, now's your chance to click out the video. But with all out of the way, we have 11 people to talk about, and it's wasting more time. Let's go right into the video. So starting off at number 12, we had the most recent boot from the season, and here we have Brooklyn. And this was largely to be expected here, considering she was Tucker's main target by the end of the week, and there wasn't as much momentum to flip the vote to keep Brooklyn in particular, even though there was a flip to potentially keep Chelsea in the game over Cam, even though such a flip could have happened, considering that Brooklyn did effective work at campaign to T-Core by pitching this women's alliance, and had Kimo and T-Core pushed earlier in the week to keep Brooklyn in the game, there's a shot that both Brooklyn and Chelsea would have stayed in the game here. But as it was, Brooklyn didn't really have much of a shot once she lost the AI Arena comp. And more broadly speaking, it is interesting seeing how quickly Brooklyn's game crumbled at the point where the Cedric flip happened. It very much reminds me of Nicole from BB24, where she came into the season with a pretty low reputation, someone who I thought was going to flame out early, but then got into a good position for the first couple weeks, only for that to completely crumble and for her to be taking out the next opportunity. I feel like obviously Brooklyn's a bit more likable than Nicole for obvious reasons here, but it is funny seeing how similar their trajectories were here. And I do feel bad for Brooklyn. I feel like she's definitely someone that could have been a decent player, but was a bit too passive, and you do have to falter a good amount for letting go of Leah McKenzie that caused her game to really sink in week 4 there. But obviously she's now out of the game, which is why she's here at number 12. And with that, there are 11 people left in the game to talk about, and as usual, I'll be ranking them based on how likely I think they're to win the game based off their current game position. But at number 11, we have the person who I think is the least likely to win from this point on, and here we have Angela. Now, is Angela actually the most likely to go home on Thursday night? I wouldn't say so. I feel like there are definitely bigger targets compared to her. And obviously a lot of it will come down to what happens in the AI Arena comp. But I feel like of the 3 people currently on the block, I think Angela has the least amount of upside, where on one hand, I think she's the least likely of the 3 to actually win the comp and is the least likely to get off the block to begin with. But even beyond that, I feel like she has the least win equity of the 3, where I feel like even if she gets towards the end, which I think is somewhat likely, I think she doesn't win there. And on top of all of that, she's not even locked safe for the week, where in both of the scenarios where she's on the block, she probably gets votes against her, where in the Tucker scenario, she gets the votes of Joseph, Rabina, Kimo, possibly even Quinn, which is even more ridiculous there. But then even if she's against McKenzie, you would have people like Chelsea and Cam that would be pushing to keep MJ over her. So I feel like Angela is not even guaranteed to stay at the end of the week. And you mix that on top of the other problems with her game, like the fact that she's not likely to win the A Arena comp, the fact that she's not really respected in the house, and also, she herself plays pretty poorly this week, where first you have her wanting to take Tucker out of the game, which is pretty bad on Angela's end, where even though it benefits most of the house for Tucker to leave, considering how big of a threat he is, Angela's one of the people that should be wanting Tucker to stay, as Tucker is one of her few allies in the house, so her wanting Tucker out is not particularly great there. But then you also have her campaign to keep Leah off the block after the veto, when her and Leah are one of 2 people to be the replacement nom. Angela's actively campaigning for her opposition to be safe there, so she's just putting herself into more danger here. I feel like in general, Angela's not playing particularly well, mixing that in with all the other issues there. It made it so that I feel like she has the least upside of the 3 people currently on the block, even though she's not the most likely to go home by Thursday night. But I feel like those knocks were so massive that I had to have her here at number 11. Now moving on to number 10, and we have the person who is probably the main target for this week, even though they still have a number of outs here, but we do have Tucker. And again, I could see Tucker being in the spot, especially after T-Core won HOH, though even then, it wasn't even a guarantee that he would end up on the block, where initially T-Core is banking on Tucker volunteering for the block, which he did offer up, and while he did regret it later on, I feel like that was enough to give T-Core the edge to put her up, even though T-Core probably would not have done so had Tucker not volunteered for the block, which again just speaks to how Tucker is on the season. But then even beyond that, you have him not really trying to win the veto here, where he doesn't even take the veto during the Yankee swap, doesn't really gun for it that hard. And then on top of that, you have after the veto, where he has this massive blow up after Angela's replacement nom. He goes around telling people that he wants to go home and that he's just being a pretty bad sport about it. And while he does calm down eventually, I think the fact that he didn't really try to win the veto to begin with is not particularly great here. And obviously, he's now on the block. He's coming to Thursday night where he has to win the AI Arena comp here. And I think there's a very serious shot that he goes home if he doesn't win that comp, which is all pretty bad. Though there are two major reasons why he is not at the very bottom here. One is that I do have a decent amount of confidence that he will in fact win that comp, considering his track record here and considering that he has proven to be pretty good when he actually tries. So I feel like through that, Tucker does have a decent shot at coming off here. But I think on top of that, even if he loses the AI Arena comp, he definitely would have some votes to stay here, where you have the likes of Joseph, Rabina, and Kimo that all have talked about wanting to keep Tucker in the house this week, where you have people like Joseph and Rabina who are actively working with him. You have Kimo, who does have a crush on him, all things considered, but he also thinks that they should be using Tucker as a shield here. You even have Quinn, his biggest rival in the house, talking about how he wants to keep Tucker in the game over Angela, which is really insane there. So while you would expect that he would be the shoo-in to be taken out, considering how out in front he is in competitions, and I think by the end of it, there will be enough momentum to actually vote him out if they see him sitting there on eviction night. It's not necessarily a shoo-in that he'll be voted out the way that you would expect him to. So I think those things are just enough to where Tucker's not at the very bottom here, even though he is technically T-Core's target here, though we'll have to see how the rest of the week pans out. But I feel like for all those reasons, I do have him here on number 10. Now moving on to number 9, and I wasn't entirely sure what to do with this person. They're really this low because they're on the block right now, but we do have McKenzie. Now, truth be told, I think McKenzie has made some inroads in this past week, where it does seem like she has been doing effective work at building inroads with the likes of Rabina and Chelsea, to where now you have people wanting to keep her in the game if she's up on the block against Angela on Thursday night, which I think is pretty good there. And on top of that, I think she probably has more upside than someone like Angela, where I feel like McKenzie does have some comp ability to where she could not only take herself off the AI Arena comp this week, but also in the future. I think if she's able to stay in the game and get some leg room, then I think McKenzie could go on a bit of a comp run here. So I think there's definitely some upside here with having McKenzie, but really the reason she's this low is that there's still technically a world where she goes home this week, where assuming the momentum isn't there to take out Tucker and she's there against Tucker, I could see her being sniped out of the game. Even against Angela, I think it could get a bit wonky there. So I think there's still enough up in the air with the actual vote to where I don't feel too comfortable having McKenzie that much higher. And at the end of the day, I feel like a lot of it's based on speculation as well. So I feel like for now I had to have McKenzie a bit lower, but I do think she is technically on the upswing here. And I think if she's able to survive this, I do think there is a world where she starts to improve her position slightly, which is enough to have her here at number 9. Now moving on to number 8, and this person has technically dropped from last week, even though they are safe, even though they are off the block, and there are definitely people that are pulling her into more things now, but I feel like this person was also kind of saved by things outside their control. But number 8, we do have Leah, and it is kind of crazy how much danger Leah was in for a lot of the week here, where it was assumed for a lot of the week that she was this favorite to be the renom here had the veto been used. And sure enough, after the veto is used by Cam, it was basically between Angela and Leah over who was going to be the renom. And it was in a spot to where Leah would not have been lock safe had she gone up, where had she gone up and Tucker won the AI Arena comp, she would have been in a lot of danger going home against MJ, getting sniped out of the game relatively early, which is all pretty bad there. And while she does manage to avoid the block, I feel like it's not really due to a lot that Leah actually did, or a lot of it came down to Joseph and Quinn campaigning to keep her off the block to T-Core, and T-Core herself admitted afterwards that a big reason why she didn't put up Leah over Angela was because she was more upset at the prospect of putting up Leah over Angela. Again, T-Core herself was kind of rattled by this decision, found it very difficult. And while I could say that this speaks to Leah's relationship with T-Core, I think if anything, it speaks more to how T-Core is a bit indecisive in the game and someone who is kind of afraid to make big moves directly head on, where obviously Kimo and T-Core have repeatedly talked about wanting to throw Leah under the bus to Quinn, where they have this dirt that they have against Leah that they have been wanting to use to turn Quinn against her, someone who was fighting to keep her off the block, and yet they haven't because they simply don't want to confront Quinn about it. So I feel like Leah's gotten incredibly lucky that Kimo and T-Core are not these confrontational people, these people that don't really want to like actively throw Leah under the bus here. And despite a lot of the stuff that she's done to undermine Quinn during a lot of the game. So I'm not entirely sure how much credit to give Leah for saving herself here. But at the same time, she is pretty safe at this point, and there are obviously people that want to work with her. People like Joseph, for instance. Even Cam has talked about wanting to pull her in this week now that Cam's playing the game a bit more. So again, she is starting to be pulled into more things, but I think a bigger problem for Leah is that I just don't see her having a lot of win equity right now, where you even have Joseph, one of her final twos, telling her to her face that he feels like he can beat anyone at the end. And I think that kind of speaks to Leah's lack of win equity there. So I feel like that kind of makes it difficult to have Leah too high in this ranking here, even though she is technically safe, even though you can claim that her bonds are what kept her on the block this week. But if we are looking more long term, I feel like that's kind of leaving Leah here at number 8. Now moving on to number 7, we have another player that I'm not too sure what to do with at this point, but we do have Quinn. And Quinn continues to confuse me in the game where on one hand, he is relatively safe in the game. I feel like there aren't that many people gunning for him, and I feel like that could put him into this interesting position moving forward. But on the other hand, I do have to knock him a decent amount for not even wanting Tucker out this week, where he has talked repeatedly about how he wants Angela to go out over Tucker this week, which is really insane there, where he's going to go so far as to vote out Angela over Tucker, even if Tucker's still on the block, which I think is all pretty bad there. Now, again, he is still pretty safe in the game, and you can definitely give him some credit for pushing to keep Leah off the block, but it was in a spot to where he doesn't even know the full extent of the fact that Leah isn't really with him at this point, and Leah is starting to build these other options. And it's more so due to Kimo and T-Core not fully telling Quinn about the full extent of Leah's relationship with him that's kind of left him in the dark there. So again, not looking particularly great here, but he is still pretty safe in the game. There are definitely people that want to work with him, people like Joseph, for instance. Again, all that's pretty good. But I feel like beyond that, I can't really have Quinn too much higher right now than number 7. Now moving on to number 6, and this player is definitely on the upswing. I feel like this person is starting to play the game a lot more than what they have before. But number 6, we do have Cam. And I kind of struggled with where to put Cam, considering he could have gone home last week, where there was this flip all ready to go to take him out if Brooklyn had won the AI Arena comp. And obviously he kind of gets saved due to Chelsea winning it instead. But now that he's safe, we are starting to see him play the game more, which is kind of crazy there, where now he's talking to Chelsea about how he wants to target Tucker and that he wants to work with Leah more. And we do see him follow through with talking to Leah and pulling her in and making a follow through with Tucker. Like, we're starting to see him do a lot more within the game, which is really funny, all things considered, considering that he very well could have gone home last week had Brooklyn won the AI Arena comp. Now, he is put up as a pawn here, which is obviously not great, but he later goes on to win the veto, which is good. And I think if Cam is able to keep up this momentum, then there's a serious shot that he could become this big power player. And if Tucker goes home this week, or possibly in the next few weeks, I can very well see Cam like suddenly becoming the biggest physical threat left in the house and someone that can suddenly go on this big comp run. Now, again, a lot of that will come down to whether the comps will be equitable or whether they will turn more physical. But I'm starting to feel better about Cam than I did last week. Now, again, I had to temper my expectations slightly. I can't go too high on him. But I feel like with what we've been seeing from him, it's definitely an improvement, which is why he's here at number 6. Now moving on to number 5, and we're going from someone who I'm feeling better about to someone who I guess I'm feeling worse about now, but we do have Joseph. And I feel like my view of Joseph hasn't really changed all that much, where in previous weeks we have seen him like acting pretty overconfident, like he's someone who acts like the main character of the season, someone who wants to have a deep dive when the season's over. And we're definitely seeing that more on display here, where you have him now thinking he can win America's favorite player. You have him telling Quinn that it's not worth it for Quinn to repair his relationship with Tucker. That just makes it even more obvious that he's working with Tucker and that he wants to have Tucker all to himself, which is not particularly great here. You also have him telling Leah to her face that he thinks he can beat everyone at the end, which is a really insane thing to say there, especially when he supposedly has a final two with Leah. And you later have him thinking that he is the one that kept Leah off the block after the veto, even though he was in solitary confinement for 24 hours, which further speaks to his overconfidence there. So I feel like Joseph is someone that I just don't feel that great about. I feel like he's someone that is just really overestimating how good of a job he's doing and doesn't seem to realize how obvious a lot of his tactics are. I feel like he's also pretty questionable socially, to where he just comes off as pretty awkward and people just see him as pretty sketchy. I'm not feeling that great about Joseph. And to be fair, I haven't really felt great about Joseph for a lot of the season. But I think what's made it difficult to rank him on this list is that despite that, he has technically been the majority. He has technically been in a decent spot for a lot of the game, even though I feel like he is starting to slip once again, where we're now seeing this new alliance form with Kimo, T-Core, Tucker, and Rubina that doesn't include Joseph there. So I think people are starting to catch on to Joseph a bit more. And it would shock me if his overconfidence just eventually leads to his own undoing here, which is why he's here at number 5. Now moving on to number 4, and I wasn't sure what to do with this person considering they are technically on the bottom right now, but I feel like they are still kind of safe despite that. But we do have Chelsea. Now Chelsea is technically in the bottom here, where she obviously lost Brooklyn, one of her closest allies, and she is technically not in the majority alliance at this point. And there are people that still want to have her go up at some point, where you have people like Joseph that wanted her to go up as a pawn earlier in the week. You have Leah, who really doesn't like her at this point. And there was some questionable comments that Leah supposedly made, though we don't know the full context of that. So there are obviously people that wouldn't be upset about Chelsea going up, but there are also plenty of defenders for Chelsea as well, where Kimo and T-Core are one of the big defenders of Chelsea from last week, where they wanted to keep her safe, even though they didn't really have that big of a relationship with Chelsea, which is really insane there. But obviously once T-Core won HOH, she was pretty safe there, to where even though Chelsea is not in an alliance with T-Core, T-Core made it clear right from the start that she is not putting up Chelsea in any circumstance, which I think speaks to how well positioned she is within the majority alliance, even though she is not technically part of it. But at the same time, I feel like Chelsea is one of the better all-around players of this group, where I feel like something else to point out with this cast is it's become increasingly apparent that there isn't really a big standout player here. But I think if I were to rank these players based on how much confidence I have in them on any given season, I think Chelsea's one of the better players here. I feel like she doesn't have as many issues as a player compared to a lot of other people, which is why I do have some confidence that she can eventually get back into a decent position at some point. Now, again, who knows what will happen here, but I do feel like between her being a well-rounded player, with her wanting to be the main people taking out Tucker here, if Tucker is on the block, I think that speaks to Chelsea's ability as well, which is why she's here at number 4. Now moving on to number 3, and number 3 and 2 are pretty close. It was just a matter of ordering them. But number 3, I did decide to go with Kimo here. And the main reason that I did is, on one hand, I think I have a bit more confidence in Kimo to do well long term moving forward compared to the number 2 person. I feel like Kimo still is aligned with T-Core. He still has that connection there. And through that, he is technically in a very solid position within the house. But at the same time, I do think he's also making a pretty big mistake here by wanting to keep Tucker in the game, where even though it's become apparent that T-Core actually wants to take out Tucker this week, or at least it seems that way, Kimo himself is going so far as to help Tucker study his days and to help him get better at these mental comps, just kind of undermining a lot of what T-Core's doing here and making it more difficult to take out Tucker later on in the game. And I think Kimo also has some questionable logic for wanting to keep Tucker in the game, where admittedly I think some of it is emotional, where he does seem to have a crush on Tucker, but I think some of it is also Kimo thinking that he can drag Tucker along as a shield, which again, is understandable, but I do think it is also incredibly dangerous to keep Tucker in the game, and even going so far as to help him winning comps in the future, like OTEV, to where it could be hard to take out Tucker later on when you need him to. And on top of that, I don't think Kimo's done much to improve his position with Tucker either, where I feel like Tucker would choose plenty of other people over Kimo, where I feel like he would choose Rubina over Kimo. He would choose Angela over Kimo. He possibly even chooses Joseph over Kimo. So I feel like for Kimo to want to keep Tucker in the game doesn't even benefit Kimo that much. So it is kind of crazy that he wants to vote to keep Tucker in the game when T-Core clearly wants Tucker out. So I feel like I very much question Kimo's logic there, which is a big reason why he is lower here, but he is still technically in a stronger position than plenty of other people in the house. And I feel like through that, he is obviously going to be in it for a decent amount of time. It's just a question of whether Tucker can get out of the game before it really bites Kimo in the butt. So I feel like for that reason, considering his logic here, I do have to drop him here to number 3. Now moving on to number 2, and it is the same top 2 as last week, and believe it or not, it's the same order. But number 2, we do have Rubina here. Now, again, I did debate this. I felt like I did consider having Rubina a bit lower here, particularly because I feel like Rubina, kind of similar to Leah, kind of struggles with win equity, where Leah in particular was kind of annoyed at Rubina this past week, where she talked about wishing that Rubina would play an individual game as opposed to playing with Tucker. And that's definitely an issue. I feel like Rubina is someone who definitely needs to do more to separate herself from Tucker if she wants to actually win the game by the end of it. And the fact that she's now, like, again, on this group who want to keep Tucker in the game is not particularly great. Though I think part of the reason why she's above Kimo for me is I feel like it benefits her more to keep Tucker in the game compared to Kimo, where I feel like Tucker would choose Rubina before Kimo. So I feel like in the case that Tucker wins the arena and then starts to win more competitions in the future, I think that would definitely benefit Rubina more, give her more long-term prospects in the game. Though at the same time would also, again, call into question her win equity here. And obviously that's a big issue here. Like, I'm still concerned about Rubina's overall win equity in the game and how much he's doing to really distinguish herself from the rest of the crowd. But I feel like unlike someone like Leah, I feel like Rubina is definitely more insulated in the majority alliance. She is now part of this alliance with Kimo and T-Core, and I feel like if that ends up running the table, which is more likely than stuff that Leah's involved with, I feel like that definitely gives Rubina a lot of runway to potentially get deeper into the game. It's just a question of whether she can win, and I'm not too sure she can right now. And truth be told, we're still at a point in the season where really the game is really up for grabs for anyone to take. And I would probably have more confidence in someone like a Chelsea or even a Cam to overtake someone like Rubina's power structure at some point. But I feel like considering where we are right now, I did decide to give Rubina the edge as she is technically in the better position at the moment, which is why she is here at number 2. And now at number 1, the person I believe is the most likely to win Big Brother 26 right now is still T-Core. And obviously, T-Core's the current HOH, and she is coming out of it in a somewhat decent position here, where on one hand, we definitely saw more of her flaws on display here, where her biggest flaws are indecisiveness, where she was very much going back and forth between putting up Leah and Angela for the renom. And even before that, you had her wanting Tucker on the block, but not actually wanting to do it unless he volunteered for the block. Which, again, like the fact that she is not more proactive is not particularly great. You also have her once again want to tell Quinn that Leah's not really on his side, but despite that, doesn't really like tackle it full on like he does. She doesn't really tell him fully that Leah's against him, just kind of tells him like bits and pieces there. So I feel like T-Core is still the same it person at the end of the day, and obviously with that comes a lot of the issues. But despite that, I think that kind of works out in our favor, where even though Tucker is still on the block and is in a spot to where he could go home, it's not really in a spot to where Tucker's that mad at T-Core, where he seems very understanding of T-Core and the position that she's in, to where I don't think she really has burned any favor with Tucker through this, like regardless of whether he stays or whether he goes, where obviously she's leaning towards him going. But at the same time, you also have the fact that everyone was very excited that she won HOH at the beginning of the week. Like, everyone was actively celebrating the fact that she had won, even though she didn't really try that hard to win it. It was more so everyone just sucking at the quiz comp. But I think that also speaks to how she is very much in a powerful position. And even after all that, like, she is still in a good position. Like, she hasn't really upset anyone through her HOH reign. And she's now in a spot to where she essentially decides how the week goes. Where if she really pushes for Tucker to go, which I think she is leaning towards, she definitely has the power to direct a lot of votes towards Tucker if he stays up on the block there. The problem is that she hasn't really been as proactive, which is what you would expect from T-Core at this point in the season. So I feel like through that, I feel like T-Core kind of has to still be here at number 1, considering she is coming out of this HOH reign in a good position still and has the potential to make this big move in taking out Tucker here. And even if she does take out Tucker here, I still don't think she's going to be seen as that big of a threat, considering like her demeanor and coming off is pretty indecisive there. Now, obviously, long term, that could tie into her like maybe not having the most win equity in the world, like if people don't really see her as being that hard of a player. but I still think she's coming out this week in a decent position. I still feel like she is someone that is very well liked within the house, and it wouldn't shock me if she continues to be in a good position moving forward, which is why she's here at number 1. And there we go, that'll do it for this week's video. If you like this content, be sure to like and subscribe, really helps with the channel. Now I'll be back again next week to update the power rankings again, so looking forward to that. I'm beginning to cover other shows as they come up, like Survivor 47 and Hell's Kitchen, so you can look forward to those shows. I am on Patreon and YouTube membership, so if you want to consider supporting the channel, you can do so by clicking the link in the description. And you can also join the Discord server by also clicking the link in the description. There's a lot of stuff coming your way, but for now, that is the video. See ya.